Hi everyone, so I'm Jadee. I recently graduated from SMU like last semester back in December, so I thought I would make this video to kind of share some of my takeaways from my 4.5 years there, because uni was very different from what I expected it to be, and it was one of the most like challenging parts of my life. So I felt like, okay, if I can share some tips and maybe help you if you're considering coming to SMU, that would be great. So some of the things that I'll be talking about aren't specific to SMU. I feel like you might experience them if you went to any other uni, but some of them are. I hope this is helpful for whoever's thinking of coming to SMU. So yeah, my first tip would be to see uni as a place where the experience is what you make of it. So if you came from somewhere like JC like I did, you're probably quite used to just going through the motion and kind of doing what was laid out for you. So yeah, you go for classes, go for CCA and come home, and you won't really have much time to do anything else. But when it comes to uni and SMU in particular, you have like a max of like 15 hours of classes every week. So that means you have a lot of time outside of class to basically do anything with it. Like you could join like 7 CCAs, but that will probably burn you out. Start like a side hustle. You could take on like a part-time internship. Like it's really up to you on how busy or how free you want to be in uni. I kind of didn't realize this when I went in until like maybe a year in, where I was like, actually I have a lot of free time. Like I don't know, I was kind of like just doing the bare minimum, and I realized in uni opportunities don't get handed to you. You really do have to go out and like seek them for yourself. Either like make use of the job portals in uni, make use of the millions of CCAs, not millions, but like the hundreds of CCAs that are available. And a lot of times I think you realize that even if you're in the same major as someone, you might not have the same experience as them throughout the 4 years, because you guys are interested in different things outside of what you learn in class. My advice would just be like to take advantage of that additional time and freedom to just explore and do things that you want. My next learning point was to make learning a goal on its own, because I know in like uni and especially SMU's very like competitive nature, it's very easy to lose sight of anything but your GPA, and so people get like really hell-bent on like just focusing on GPA. But I realized that I was very like stressed, and I really didn't see like the value in learning, so it felt like learning and studying was like a chore, until I kind of changed my mindset and became more like, okay, I'm here to learn, so I'm just gonna try to find meaning in the modules that I was taking, and I would like read up on things outside of school that I found like could possibly like relate to what I was learning in class. I'll try to apply some of the concepts into like my own personal life, especially like my psychology modules. So I think that just made the entire experience a little bit more bearable and less like I'm doing this because I have to, that kind of way of thinking. And inadvertently, when you make learning a goal on its own, you're also less afraid of making mistakes, because you don't take it as personally, and it's a lot easier to bounce back from mistakes when you are just more focused on learning and growing. This is very important, as I feel like, especially for uni, because you're going through like 4 years of it and there's like 8 semesters. So if you let yourself get very caught up in just not making any mistakes, you're gonna beat yourself up really early on if you do like tumble or anything, and then you won't have the stamina to like finish your degree. The next one has to do with SMU specifically, and this might be a hot take, so if you went to SMU and you don't agree with it, I'm sorry, but my hot take is that class part is free marks. When a lot of people come into SMU, the one component that scares them the most is class part, because I think especially if you came from JC, you're not used to just like talking in class and like giving your random opinion like out of nowhere and then being graded for it. I think that whole concept is quite daunting, but when you get out of your head, you realize that actually not taking it so seriously makes class part a lot more enjoyable and easy for you. There's this thing that I want to talk about, which is something we learn in psychology called the spotlight effect, and basically it's how everyone tends to overestimate how much others are noticing them, because we're also like inward looking, right? We think that everyone is like paying so much attention to what we're doing or saying, but in reality, because everyone thinks that and everyone is so self-fixated, it's just not true. So once you get out of that very self-conscious mindset, it's a lot easier for you to just you know, speak your mind. You don't ever want to waste that opportunity, because like that 10-15% could really change your grade by like an entire grade at the end of the day. And a lot of times when you just are able to substantiate what you're saying with like evidence that you've read outside of class or in one of the readings or whatever, profs will usually accept it, you know. So yeah, that's my spiel on class part. I can make an entire video on it because I've learned a few tips and tricks that you won't really know until you experience SMU. So if you want a video on class part, I can make that as well. So my next advice is to manage your time well. Uni is basically like a condensed A-level like 8 times, which sounds very scary, and it probably makes nobody want to come to uni now, but it kind of felt like that because every semester is like 5 months-ish, and you are thrown into like classes every week, and then you have assignments, and you're thrown into like usually like a final paper or like a final assignment at the end. So if you don't manage your time well, it's very easy to last minute realize that you have a lot of things to do, especially during like project season or midterms or finals. So what I use is Notion to put down like my weekly to-dos at one go, so I can kind of plan out like my study routine, and also like time where I want to hang out with friends, time where I want to go for my CCA like commitments and stuff. Like having it all put in makes it less likely that you freak out at the last moment. And I would recommend Notion, or you could just like do it on like a diary or something like that. Yeah, so for my next tip and takeaway, it's basically you should build your support system because you're probably gonna need it. So I have this theory that everyone breaks down at some point in uni. Like it could be in year 1 when you're like just in orientation camp and you're like freaking out because like life is gonna be very different for you. It can be in the middle of year 3 when you are suffering in a project and you just cannot tahan like your group mates anymore. So everyone will break down, and you really do need like a core group of friends to help you get by, especially in uni and in SMU. I would say more so than the other unis for a few reasons. So I think back in like JC and poly, you kind of had the same class throughout those 2 or 3 years, so your friendships were solidified basically because you guys were always in proximity to each other, and it's kind of like friendships of convenience in a sense where you guys see each other every day, so it's very easy to build like deeper relationships. But something I realized when I came to uni is that friendships come and go because the nature of it is that you're always in different modules every semester, and you might not even be the same class as a person that you met in year 1 ever again, because you guys are like taking different majors, or you guys have like different modules that you want to take. So it's all the more important to build like that core support system in uni to really get you through like the emotionally stressful times. You know, SMU doesn't really have much of a hall life culture. I mean, Princep is there, but like it doesn't have a strong like hall life culture. So if you don't go out of your way to make like solid friendships, it can feel quite like lonely and isolating. What I would recommend is like joining a CCA. Like that's what I did. So I joined Conjunct, which is the best CCA if you're coming to SMU. But I felt like doing that and sticking through my CCA for like 2 or 3 years actually helped me feel like there was a little bit more stability in my social life than just if I were to not make friends that I didn't see outside of a class context. For you, it could also be like maybe joining an orientation camp in year 1, and then like some of your friends like that you made there, you guys stick through it all and see each other through the 4 years. Or your support system could also be people that you've already met before, like in JC or poly or secondary school or even earlier, and just I guess taking initiative to meet up with them. And whatever you do, don't make your boyfriend or girlfriend your only friend. Okay, like don't make that mistake that a lot of people, including myself, did. Because I think once you break up, I mean if you break up, like touch wood, if you break up, you're gonna feel very isolated. So yeah. My next takeaway is also more to do with surviving uni, not so much just like doing well in uni. Which is you need to know your identity markers. And what I mean by that is that what does your self-worth like depend on, and what does your identity hinge on? Like if it's solely grades or how great of a name your internship, I would say it's quite tough to make it through uni because so much of your identity is dependent on these things that when you don't have these things, or when you face a setback in your career or academics throughout uni, you're gonna find it really hard to recover. That's why I think it's very important to know what else defines your self-worth. So it could be like, whether are you a good friend, you know, do you help your friends when you see them struggling around you, how well you perform or step up in your own CCA. It could be you pursuing your side hobbies outside of school, and all these things you need to internalize and tell yourself that even if I don't do well for this one test, like I'm still a good person in these other aspects, and I'm still doing well in these other aspects. So I think it's very important to still be ambitious and still try to do well in school, but at the end of the day know that like your self-worth is not entirely dependent on your grades. I think something else to realize is that your final GPA is not as important as you might think it is, because it might help you get your first job, but beyond that, I think how your life turns out depends a lot on the opportunities that you seek out and how well you perform on the job. So as cheesy as it sounds, your GPA doesn't define you, because it literally doesn't define you, and in the long run it's not going to matter as much. And this kind of links to my next point. So like my advice would be like to not put all your eggs in the academic basket, because when people hire you next time, they're gonna look at your CV and they're gonna consider, like, for example, the leadership positions you took up in CCA, the volunteering work you did, or any kind of other projects that you did outside of school, and even like your internships that make you like a well-rounded person. So being not so like tunnel visioned on like just solely getting good grades is like ultimately the strategy, I would say, to go through uni, and that will also give you a lot more freedom to do things outside of school that are interesting and exciting and more practical, because sitting through a test isn't like always like the best test of your abilities. So if you can go out there and like contribute and learn things in other ways, in more practical ways, it's definitely going to help you in the long run. So my next advice would be to not underestimate the small stuff. So if you came from poly, I guess this is probably not news to you, but like every single little component in uni will add up to define your grade at the end. So it could be stuff like midterm exams, it could be like a weekly quiz in class, it could be class participation, group project, or individual assignments, and then like a final. So you really want to ensure that you cover all your bases and not just like study for finals at the end, because finals might just be like 30% or something. But if you consistently don't do well, then like that 30% isn't gonna save you. For instance, like a lot of classes have this little cumulative activities that help you score like, for example, 1 or 2% every week. But if you add up and you don't do these things for like 10 weeks, you end up losing like 10% or like 20%. So it's very important to realize that the little things add up, and that you pay attention to all these little components that could potentially like change your grade from like an A- to an A, something like that. My last tip that I want to give for you guys in uni is don't be afraid to swerve or pivot. Even if you don't know what you want to do for your career, it's totally fine. And then you have like multiple interests, it's totally fine. And before you're thrown into like a 9 to 5 or you're starting your first job, I feel that uni is really the time for you to explore and just try as much as you desire, and not be so afraid to change a direction if you feel like something is not right for you. So if you have always been like in sociology or something, and suddenly you develop an interest in tech or like coding, it's totally okay to entertain that kind of curiosity and go and find like, I don't know, like go on Coursera and take a course, or go and take an IS mod just for the fun of it, and at least let yourself have the chance to explore their interests and see if there's anything there, rather than like live to regret it after you graduate and realizing that like, oh no, like I'm in this job that like I never wanted to go in, but because I was too afraid to explore, I didn't, you know, bother to like swerve or pivot. For me, it was a very real experience, because I started off being interested in psychology, and then for a while I did HR as a major because I thought I would go into HR, but I realized that I was ultimately more interested in creative work and writing, so I dropped my HR major and I just tried something else, which is creative and advertising. And I'm really glad I did, because had I not done that, I think I would be in an HR job right now, which might be slightly miserable for me, because like I'm someone that just needs something less SOP driven, and that's exactly what HR is. So yeah, I would really recommend that you explore. And one more added benefit of doing that is that in today's hiring landscape, people like to see prospective employees that are very well versed in several areas and not just one. So if you have like skill sets across multiple areas, it could actually be of value to the company, and you might actually bump up your chances of being hired rather than being very like focused on one technical skill. Yeah, just don't be afraid to explore and let yourself seek out opportunities and take time to figure things out. Yeah, essentially that's all I have. If you want to see any more like uni related content, or if you have any questions for me with regards to uni or anything else, like I'll be happy to answer them. But yeah, that's all. Bye.